Hi, everybody. So I'm really excited here. We are here to talk about the fourth episode of the Netflix series, The Crown. This one is called Act of God, and I thought was really spectacular. So we're gonna have a lot of fun talking about it. I'm here with my friend Tom.
Hi.
Hi. And so this is our third podcast that we've done on The Crown because we combined last week doing episodes 2 and 3. And I do have so this is episode 4. I do have the chat room open if anybody wants to make some comments on this episode. And do you want to give like a little summary of kind of the main events of kind of what happened at all?
I think let's see. I meant to get a hold of a plot synopsis because I think I watched it last Sunday after our conversation because I was so eager to get on with it.
Well, I can do it if you want.
I'll rough it out. Let's see if I can
Okay.
if I can manage anyway. Okay, so we begin with the cold open is these meteorologists that work for the British government. And they're talking about something that seems very dire, like they seem very concerned about it. And they're like, we're not going to be listened to, right? Yeah, I know, but we have to be able to say that we reported it, that we informed the prime minister. We have to be able to know they're covering their own butts basically by reporting this.
Right.
And it turns out it's this weird convergence, some weather phenomenon I'm not totally familiar with, where the end result is fog, deep, heavy, thick, soupy fog, and that the air pressure is incredibly low, and it results in pollution and air quality just plummeting, and it's actually very dangerous, this level of fog. So the episode surrounds this crisis, right? So the Queen and the Prime Minister would love to just get on with their day and the things that were already important to them. They have to stop everything and deal with this crisis.
Right.
So a lot of it, we see a lot of Churchill. We see a lot of what's going on with the Prime Minister in this. Elizabeth and Philip are a little more in the background in this one. So that's kind of
That's true.
And also we see we see a little bit more of Philip. He wants to fly, and butting heads with the Prime Minister about the safety of taking flying lessons and that sort of thing. Yeah,
that's true.
Does that cover it? I mean,
yeah, that covers it. I loved the fog stuff so much I almost forgot about the flying bird. I'm glad you reminded me of that. I don't know. Maybe part of it is because I live in Utah where we have inversion, and so I related to this thing a lot because we have this thing where the pollution will settle in the valley here, and so you get this fog, and it's so gross. And so I really kind of related to it, and I just thought it was so brilliant. Like I think. I mean, I had never heard of this. Did you know about this? The Great Fog? Or smog?
I have it was one of those things where like, I think I've heard about this before. I've read about this somewhere, or I've seen a newsreel footage of it or something.
I had never heard of it before.
But I had no idea it was such a dire emergency and that so many people died. Holy cow!
Yeah,
it was like a couple of 9/11s.
Wow.
The number of people that died.
Yeah, I mean, I think this would make a fascinating movie. I mean, you could just stretch this out just a little bit, just a half an hour more or whatever, and I'm so fascinated by this whole event, and I don't know. I just thought that Churchill's plot line with what he does just was masterful and fascinating, and just the way it was filmed and the way it was. I was just so excited after I saw it. I don't know. I'm like, I know this sounds like hyperbole, but I really thought this was one of the most impressive episodes of television I've ever seen. I thought it was amazing.
Yeah, it's if I was going to try to sell somebody on watching this is the one I'd show them.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, I told Abby today, I said, you could just watch just this episode. Really. I mean, it's kind of self-contained in a weird way.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah,
it's got its own little arc, and there's stuff that fits in with the larger picture, but like you don't need to know. Like everything you need to know is presented to you.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, because it's really just, and I'm sold on Lithgow as Churchill. Again, it took me a while, but he
Okay.
was so good in this, and I don't know, I just thought it was so interesting to see the way like he goes from being this really practical kind of a guy to being this sort of master manipulator, and the way he was able to flip that switch was
Mhm.
brilliant, and also just the heart that he showed about the secretary. And I mean, we're going to get on all of this, but all of those things just worked for me, and I totally bought it. So,
Yeah.
anyway.
The flying stuff stuck out to me because I noticed they were using biplanes, and I sort of have an affection for World War One aviation. So they're still using sort of the World War One style planes to train, and that was kind of fun to see and fun to imagine what that was like. And I love that part where they shut down the engine and go in and just glide in. That was kind of cool, and I was deeply envious of being in an open air cockpit like that and over the English countryside.
Yeah, that was beautiful. And such a contrast to
Yeah,
what we would see in just a few minutes later.
yeah, the
Just.
soup. Yeah, and actually, I sort of there's a symbolism there, sort of um, that alternately, the queen must go through that soup and clear sunny skies and a beautiful view alternately, where
Yeah.
sometimes the way ahead seems very clear and beautiful, and the majesty of their position is apparent to them, and
Well, I
other
don't.
times they feel completely closed in on
Yeah.
all sides.
Do you, you might have this part of your question, so we can, if you do, we can move on. But I was wondering, are you surprised that so much of this is a surprise for the queen about things like her name and her, all that stuff? Because I would think, I guess I always figured they had some kind of like education specific to a queen of like, here's your queenly duties and here's what's going to happen and here's, you know what I mean? Like that would just sort of be part of her education of, uh, growing up.
Yeah, no, not formally, but I think that her father prepared her as well as he could. I think that this I tend to my tendency is to think that they're playing up her learning curve a little more than maybe
Mm.
she actually had to go through.
Because I would just assume that you'd have to have like etiquette classes, and you'd have like, all of that kind of stuff would be sort of formally taught to you about how to talk to people and how to, but maybe not. Maybe they're just assume that you learn that as you go.
Right. Well, and yeah. Well, I think she was fairly well prepared. I think it's interesting. It does make for interesting TV though to see her sort of flounder a little bit.
Hmm. Well, and just see her. I wonder if they're trying to kind of make her feel more modern, to make her buck up against all these traditions, and it could be true. I don't know anything about it, so who knows? But they're probably trying to play up sort of her modern aspects as opposed to the more traditional aspects of her.
Yeah. Um, yeah. So uh, we in this episode we kind of get a wrapping up of the story arc for this assistant, right? Okay, her name escapes me. I'm trying to look it up. Venetia.
Mm.
Um, right. So we meet her. Churchill meets her in episode one, and all we really get in that is kind of a lingering look, and we assume it's because she's a pretty girl, right, and the new girl. And maybe that's all it is at that point. But then he kind of taps her to personally help him in the next episode, I think episode two, where she's reading him his box while he's in the bath, um, and from the other side of the door,
Mm.
and we start to see that she has a special affection for him, and she's a big fangirl for Churchill, right? Especially in this episode. What did you think about her arc, and how was that? How do you feel like that was handled?
Oh, so good. I thought, it was you you totally saw kind of why she was making the choices that she would make, and that she was out there to try to help her roommate, But she really believed, I really related to it because I was definitely an idealist when I was around her age, as far as really believing in public servants and that they, for the most part, had our best interests at heart. And, that it's the kind of thing that I could picture myself kind of at that age doing, and really going out of my way to kind of help people that I had sort of political crushes on, for lack of a better word.
Right.
And I don't know, just the way that I would totally be the one out there getting my roommate to the hospital. I would be the one, not that I'm some hero or something, but that's just the way that I bond with my roommates. And so I thought that felt real, and it was just devastating when, I don't know, just felt like a mentor. I've always been a person who's a big mentor person, who has people that I really look up to and go to for guidance, and so for me, I related to that aspect of him really caring for her as sort of this girl that he'd helped teach and mentor, I guess, and just this sad loss of life.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought it was an interesting way to sort of help the viewer who may not be familiar with Churchill's biography to kind of get familiar with it, and sort of touch on some of the higher points of his biography and his quotations, his affection for the empire, all that sort of stuff. Because she's a fangirl, she sort of goes through and quotes all that stuff. I thought that was kind of cool and interesting, an interesting way to present that.
Yeah.
And actually, that's going to be a theme all through this that I think I'm going to pay attention to is how do they educate their viewers without it turning into a documentary or without dragging the story down.
Or without it really feeling preachy. I mean, this just showed that the combination of sort of the, like I was saying, the manipulative politician of Churchill versus the practical kind of politician that he was, more of the general type of politician. And, so you kind of show that dynamic without it being like, I'm going to tell you why we should have cleaner air. I'm going to give you a speech or something like that lesser writers would do.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting because in the EW.com analysis, it's interesting because she says, that about the roommate, she says, the loss is particularly gutting for the old man, considering she'd recently quoted his autobiography and inspired him. If this isn't proof that Churchill is the worst, I don't know what is. And I'm like, that's totally not how I took it at all. It's just so interesting how different people can take things.
That's an interesting interpretation. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I took that as, oh wow, I suddenly saw a human side to him.
Yeah, me too.
And I thought it was kind of sweet the way he felt like, I don't know if the funny thing is, it'd be interesting to look at it again because I'm wondering what shade of feeling is there with Churchill for Venetia. Is it the hot young thing in the office and he's kind of lusting after her? Is it she's kind of a little sister or a daughter or a granddaughter to him?
Yeah.
Is it maybe some of all of those in a weird way?
I was worried they were going to go that way with the, the more sexual way. But it didn't really, I took it more as sort of the teacher mentor kind of relationship.
Yeah.
Sort of an adoring fan, kind of a, that he can give his, it does feel really good when like you're surrounded by somebody who thinks that you're really smart or thinks that you're really funny, and it feels really good.
Yeah, it does. And but the thing is, though, when she starts quoting him back to him, that was an interesting scene.
Yeah,
I wouldn't mind looking at that again. Heck, I'm going to watch the whole thing again sometime because it is really good. But anyway,
yeah, it's interesting.
I felt like he was off put though. I felt like he was kind of like, oh, you poor thing, you have no idea who you're talking to, do you? Like that was me at 22, but I am not that guy anymore,
Yeah, there's some of that too, for sure. Sort of a judgment too. But I think that's just sort of where he started. I felt like, and then by the end, he's come. He's. I feel like he's come to see her as like a real person.
Yeah, sure.
But
Okay.
yeah, it's interesting. He's an interesting character because you think that like everybody thinks that he's a an idiot. I think in
Yeah.
politics that he's stupid, and yet he does this masterful thing that was just like okay. Because I really wasn't sure. I'm like, well, maybe he's like General Grant, who was
Right.
a good general but a terrible president. Maybe he's like that. I don't know.
Mhm.
What do I know? But this just proved to me that nope, he's not like General Grant.
Yeah. Well, I think both for us in the show and for England, like he was able to, for the first few episodes there, he was able to sort of coast on, his reputation was able to coast on this man saved England and
Hmm.
probably the whole Western world. Um, but that only took him so far.
Yeah.
He got to a point where if he was going to be feckless um, and stubborn about taking care of the people, then what exactly are you? Why exactly are you here still? Don't you need to be quietly retire now? And but no, it's fun to see him sort of triumph a little bit, even though it's to the Queen's chagrin a little bit. That was kind of interesting there at the end. What did you think of the whole thing where the Queen is kind of chagrined and
Well, first, so I think we should talk about so his opponent. This was
yeah.
really interesting
Oh yeah, that
because
stuff is good too.
yeah, because so like I didn't really understand. I have to be honest, why his opponent didn't make make the letter, make the thing news. Why he didn't go after Churchill? What was the reason in your eyes that he didn't go after him more?
I think I
Was
actually enjoyed that quite a lot because I think it showed.
you worried because
Sorry, my signal's bad. It's cutting out.
oh, can you hear me?
Uh huh. Yeah, you're smooth as glass now. But
Oh, okay, yeah, we'll keep an eye on that.
well, anyway, I think that I liked that because I sensed that there was like some. Well, I liked it and I didn't. What I liked about it is that I sensed that there was some mature reservation on on the part of his opponent, right?
Yeah,
Where his underlings are saying, "Attack! Attack! Attack! We've got him right where we want him," and he's going, "This not everything is it seems. We can't rush into this here." And he was right. If they had prematurely jumped on the prime minister, it would not have looked good for them. It would not have been a good look. What I liked about that was that our own politics, uh, our own contemporary politics, I would sure love to see more of that.
yeah, me too.
More of that reserve to just attack the other side and a little more patience. Um, maybe just that sliver of good faith that maybe
Yeah.
a sort of sliver of trust that the other side is acting in good faith. Um, what
Yep.
did bother me though is that I did sense a strong disrespect from the press and from his Churchill's political opponents that of towards this guy who literally saved their lives. Like I don't think they're like I think they've how quickly they've forgotten this man saved their lives. You
Yeah.
know, and their families and um, yeah,
Well, I mean, it is true though that how quickly even we forget. That
yeah,
I
true.
remember when they were not to make it too political, but like just how quickly people forgot about the events of 9/11, the things like and turned on our generals, turned on our things, and they may have had reasons for doing that. That's not my call, but I'm just saying that I think that we sometimes forget pretty quickly too.
Right. Yeah. And maybe it's just that's the human condition. But that
But
was all too familiar.
yeah, I
I,
mean, I think was it just the uncertainty of the weather, that he didn't want to come out against Churchill in case it didn't happen? Was that the reason why? I didn't quite understand why he decided not to. Was it just a respect for Churchill that he had, or why did he wait
I think
on
if it was
that?
respect for Churchill, it was respect for Churchill the way a bullfighter respects a bull. Um, Yeah, I think he
Yeah.
knew that, I think he knows that his opponent is really formidable and not to be trifled with.
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
think I think that's the extent to it. There was to the extent there was respect. That's what it was about.
Yeah, it made me wonder too. Do you think that this happened a lot with people stealing stuff from that meant to be in the box or meant to be, with the mail kind of like that it was? Do you think that?
Wouldn't surprise me. I'm sure there was all
Yeah,
kinds of palace intrigue, right, between the different
yeah,
aspects of government. When you have a parliamentary system like that, and all
yeah.
these different parties vying for control and jockeying for position for their agendas, and it's democracy is messy, for sure.
Yeah, this is interesting. Well, anyway, I guess we can get back to the question about Elizabeth. Um, so it was really interesting because you definitely got the impression that she was making that up on the fly.
Mhm.
That she was like, "Oh, I was planning on doing something else, and now I'm doing this," And
Yeah,
you got the impression that he knew she was doing that, which was
yeah,
also really good.
yeah.
So,
He knew what she was. Yeah. So this was the first instance, and I've kind of been waiting for this because having read some things about her, this is a pattern we're going to see again. We're going to see this kind of thing again. And actually, what surprised me about this episode is that I thought the next thing would be the coronation and all that business, um, because right, she's ascended to the throne, but the coronation hasn't happened yet,
right.
the formal ceremony, and that is an interesting story in itself. And there's a lot going on there, and I hope we see it this season. I think we will,
Yeah, I think so.
but it's anyway. This is a pattern though with her where she stands for she makes a decision. She's standing firm in it, but she finds she has to make a strategic withdrawal from that position. Uh, and What's
Yeah.
interesting here is that not only do we see that, but we also see that Churchill is willing to let her save face.
Well, and I feel like too, it's not only that she has to change her decision. I feel like she, in the end, actually doesn't have a decision. They kind of make her think that she has a decision, but in reality, most of the decisions are made by the cabinet. They're made by other people, and she kind of just ends up having to be resigned to what she can't really control that much. We'll see if that happens with this flying thing, but so far, pretty much everything has come down to nope, you really don't get to do that.
No, but she Churchill gave on the flying lessons.
Did they?
Philip
I
taught me
forgot
that.
that.
Yeah, that was important. That's a
Okay.
significant detail. That was kind of a tip of the hat on Churchill's part.
Okay, I forgot that.
Yeah, um, but yeah, these relationships are more complex than we imagine from the outside.
Yeah.
This this push and pull
Well,
between Parliament and the Prime Minister and
yeah.
the Queen. Yeah,
Because most of her choices really aren't really her choices. her
no,
biggest choice is was I think to marry Philip. I think that's the biggest like choice that she ever had.
and that was when she thought she had years and years and decades to worry about being the monarch. So
Right. Yeah. So it's very interesting. And it was interesting too to have this juxtaposition of this like to us in modern era at least this seemingly incredibly petty thing, the small thing of him flying,
yeah,
and this incredibly huge thing, 12,000 people dying, with this great fog and everything like that, which is I think so often the case, with I don't know, with all of our lives, but I assume also with politicians' lives. That I mean, I can only even imagine, even like President Obama, he's dealing with some crisis in Russia or something like that, and then also helping his daughter, do her homework or something like it. Just sort of, it's got to be a weird thing, like to deal with these mammoth things and deal with these seemingly small things too.
well, that's an interesting dichotomy you bring up
Yeah,
that tension between the personal and the public, and how the public matters because it's lots of little personal things happening, 12,000
right.
personal tragedies going down, out in this country that she has some role in,
It's
But
true.
on the other side, on the other hand, they need to be able to get up in the morning. They need to be able to take care of themselves and live their lives um, and pursue their interests and just like everybody else does.
Mm-hmm. And the show does a really good job with the dynamic, and actually that kind of brings up to the sort of the aspect of this episode with Queen Mary talking about the role of the royalty and how she was not the queen anymore, but she was the queen. And I think that was sort of the way of the show, kind of, because Peter Morgan, the writer, he's so brilliant the way that he kind of, that was sort of the narrative thread throughout all of these kind of events, I think, and sort of explaining this sort of personal versus public and the way that everything was sort of handed down.
Yeah, I completely forgot about that scene. I loved that.
Oh,
Yeah,
and
the queen versus the queen and the queen. Yeah.
And Eileen Atkins is the actress, and she is phenomenal. She's a dame, British dame, and she's a great actress.
Yeah, I know her from Doc Martin, and I actually, every time I watch this, I want to watch Doc Martin.
I know her from. Oh, sorry.
In that, she plays a psychologist who's very socially aloof. Anyway, she plays a fun character in that. But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, she's a great actress. I love her in the show Cranford. That's a period piece based on Elizabeth Gaskell, who's a contemporary of Dickens. Anyway, it's a mini-series that's really fun. It has Judi Dench and Eileen Atkins and a whole bunch of other British women that are awesome. So that's how I first knew her. But she's a great actress. And I just really thought that her job was kind of explaining the family to the viewer in a way.
Yeah, that's more along the lines of educating us all on what's going on here, the complicated relationships here. Yeah, and it really is quite a task of bringing us into this world that's very Byzantine in the complexity of its relationships.
Yeah, definitely.
Taking it all in, and we need someone to kind of clue us in without a pamphlet or without having to do our homework first.
Well, and the other thing, I was actually thinking about this today. Did another podcast on the Gilmore Girls, and there's a character in the Gilmore Girls that's very rich, the grandma, and it's so easy to write characters like that and make them really unlikable. And I think it takes a great writer to make people that are powerful, make people that are rich, to make them likable, make them a human, to not just lie in sort of cliches about, money and whatever, and how it makes you evil. And this show does such a great job also with that, of creating characters that you really like and you're fascinated by, and you want them to succeed. You're engaged in them.
Yeah. No, that's an excellent point. Yeah, there's a lot of subtlety here.
Yeah. Sorry, we kind of went on a tangent there, but yeah, from your original question. But it's so good. So many good things to talk about.
Yeah, I'm perfectly willing to follow the discussion wherever it goes. So. Let's see. That's pretty well all I have, actually. So.
Okay.
Did you have anything else you wanted to address about the episode?
Yeah, just talk really quickly though about, and you had mentioned it a little bit about the media and the way that Churchill uses the media to manipulate his position and turn him into the hero. And I guess I was just curious. Curious your sort of thoughts on that, and how often do you think that we get kind of manipulated like that? Where politicians will use the media to kind of turn themselves into sort of the hero. And I guess I'll use an example. And this is somebody I like Senator Ted Cruz. I'm a fan of his, but it was interesting to me to see him. He wrote a story about Castro, and he wrote an article about Castro today. It was very good, but I did feel like it was sort of an example of a politician kind of using the media to kind of make themselves a little bit more sort of the hero of the moment. Yeah. And there's a million examples, and I just used one that I like and respect, but there's a million other examples, of the way that somebody who's smart and crafty can kind of do that. to kind of take a story, whether it's a national disaster or and kind of prop themselves up as sort of, I'm the hero, I'm here, I'm fighting for you, I'm bringing in, I'm going to make our hospitals safer, I'm going to make things better, I'm going to whatever, and they kind of use that to make people feel like, well, hey, I have to vote for the guy who hates Castro, or hey, I have to vote for the guy who's going to bring more hospitals, or whatever kind of a thing.
Yeah, well, it's kind of a two-edged sword. Yeah, it happens. I think it's necessary because, um, we're a storytelling species. If you're going to lead thousands of us in any kind of
Yeah,
direction,
it's a good
story
point.
has to be a part of that. Let alone millions, right?
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point.
And especially where you're talking about a liberal democracy where the people are governed by consent. You have to frame reality for them in a way that they can digest. Uh, what's getting more difficult now is for politicians to do that. There's a number of factors at play. There's the fact
Mm-hmm.
that the culture is so splintered, at least in the United States,
Right.
that it's hard to find a common frame of reference that everybody can get behind. And even the two major ones, the on the right and on the left, are breaking down and morphing,
Right.
and it's everything is really kind of in flux.
Well, and there's such a short attention span too. That's the other thing
Yeah,
too. 24-hour news cycle, like something like this, could be for years. Sort of the biggest story, the thing I remember the most, and that's just not the case anymore. I mean, aside from I don't know, like I mean, it's hard to think of anything that would really stay number one news story for as long as it would have certainly back then. And now it's like it's super intense, hot, for a week, 2 weeks, and then kind of everybody moves on.
right. And it's interesting that fog is the metaphor here because uh, that's a phrase. This will burn off like so much morning fog,
Hmm.
and you'll forget that it ever happened.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's something to be said there about the transience of disasters and crises, and how you can't even imagine that it ever happened once it's
Yeah,
over.
it's true. Yeah. So I mean, I don't know. I just thought that was masterful on the part of Churchill. Just incredible the way he did that. And it was interesting too the way that like he fought it for so long, because he was just like, I can't control the weather. Like, what do you expect? And
Well, he's annoyed. He's got other things on his mind. He's worried about the entire world being destroyed by a nuclear holocaust.
yeah,
That's always foremost on his mind, and
yeah,
like it's and actually with that tension between him and his cabinet over that is interesting because
yeah,
you're wondering like, okay, who's insane here? Because yeah, he seems like he's kind of out to lunch because he's so preoccupied with this and he's ignoring the domestic stuff. On the other hand, they're idiots because they don't realize just how real a possibility it is that they might all just be shadows on the wall if someone makes a false move.
right. Yeah, but yeah, exactly. And it was just something about like there was just something that clicked with him and with him when he saw this girl dead. That it was like, that's it. I'm changing course. I'm moving. And so it was very interesting to see. And
Oh yeah, and there's that personal versus private, or that public versus private stuff going on there.
mhm,
It had to become private for him.
yeah,
Yeah, it had to
yeah, I
touch
think
him
so.
privately. Yeah.
I mean, and I guess the last thing I would just point out is that how great did that fog look? It looked so real, and I
Oh,
thought, I mean, just the
it looks so good. I
production.
didn't even think about how they did it. It didn't cross my mind.
Yeah, the production values were just incredible.
Yeah.
It didn't look cheesy at all.
One last thing I will say about the production: the music was interesting. They kept using Mozart's Requiem. Uh,
Mm,
they kind of at the beginning and then kind of at the end. Uh,
yeah,
I thought that was
yeah,
kind of
that's a good
interesting.
point. That's a very good point. All right, I guess that's everything I had then, and I just thought this was tremendous episode, and so Thanks for joining me to talk about it.
Fun as always. I'm looking forward to the next one.
Me too. So where can people find you?
I'm on Twitter at El Mono Roboto. I'm on the internet, tgunwriter.com.
Great. I have that all in the description section. And you can find me at Smiling LDS Girl on social media and at Rachel's Reviews on YouTube. So it should be a pretty fun week for me on my channel. We're going to be reviewing Bolt for the Disney canon, and we're going to have a discussion on Tuesday with my friend Mark. We're going to be talking all about Moana in detail, so that'll be really fun. So, and I just posted my blog review of Moana before this podcast, so enjoy that, and thanks again. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks.